It happened on July 29th, 2020. It was on a Saturday morning when my little front door was softly knocked by one of my best friends. We'll call him Fitz. Fitz had turned 17 last week and his father decided to buy him a new hunting rifle. He was excited to get it and he wanted to show me how cool it was. Besides a little sprinkle of jealousy, I was excited too to go on my first hunting trip. I remember every little detail of how everything went horribly wrong on that trip in my head, as if it just happened a minute ago. Fitz's 26-year-old brother Dan picked us up in his pickup truck at 6:43. Dan is the nicest outdoor guy that I've ever met. He talks so softly, but he's built like the Hulk. The only simple way to explain how he looks was like, imagine a cowboy, a gymnast, and lives in a town but is British. That's how I would explain what he would look like. I couldn't remember how long I had known Dan and Fitz. It feels like they had been in my life since the day that I was born. I took a shotgun while Fitz sat on the back of the truck, glancing at his long rifle with amazement. On the 20-minute trip, Dan was giving me so many updates about his life during Corona, including the girl that he had been hitting on for the past few weeks. As a brother, I felt like there were no boundaries between us. When we arrived at the site, I was expecting birds to be shouting here and there like in the movies, but there wasn't any. I could hear a cricket and a toad every now and then though, but I was still kind of disappointed. I was expecting the whole bird captivity on my head, but then reality really hits. I don't have a gun or a rifle, so Dan handed me his homemade spear for fishing. It's faster than using a rod, but be careful with your feet, he said. It was the first time that I went hunting and everything was so interesting to me. Being a boy who had a spear in his hand, I kept asking for something spearfishing related. Maybe or maybe not, my continuous questioning started to bother Dan, so he sent me and Fitz to a riverbank to figure it out for ourselves. I was standing near the riverbank, while Fitz was prone not far away from me, aiming his rifle to the tree across the river. I barely even tried to catch a fish. I was looking at him the whole time. He took his first shot and it wasn't good. His body pushed back and he was barely able to maintain the rifle in his hand. I laughed and then he laughed. We mocked about how bad that first shot was. We got distracted for a few minutes before he decided to give it another shot. I was jabbing randomly at every single movement I could see on the water surface, hoping one of them was a fish, and that it would be my first catch. I was no longer staring at Fitz, but I could hear every shot that he took, until I heard a different sound than the shots. It sounded so much louder but further than what Fitz's rifle had. My first thought was, wow, Dan wasn't playing around about hunting. Since we'd scattered, he had went out on his own. 1 shot, 2 shots, and then 3 shots. There was nothing weird about this shot. Even if it's not Dan, maybe it's another hunter. Until the 4th shot hit a tree behind us and it was cracked. Somebody had shot it. I couldn't see it, but I'm sure that's how it sounds when it hits a tree. I threw myself down to the ground, while Fitz did the opposite. He raised his head from his prone position, trying to find where the shot came from. Seconds later, another shot was fired and I was frightened. I could hear the bullet passing through the air. It was close, so close. I tossed my spear to the ground and I got up and I ran towards Fitz and grabbed his hand and as fast as I could, dragged him out of there and back to where Dan's truck was. Another shot was fired at us and my heart skipped a beat. My body was shaking and my knees felt so limp for a moment. I almost wept at that moment. But I took a deep breath and I kept running with Fitz, kept muttering words that I couldn't hear. We arrived at Dan's truck and were confused about whether we should call the cops or not. We decided to call Dan first and let him decide because he was the adult. He decided to call the police and then 2 police arrived almost 15 minutes later. We told every single detail to Dan during that 20-minute period and let Dan explain everything to the police. They swept the area for another 15 minutes and then came back with nothing. They couldn't find anything, not even footprints. They asked us to file a report, but Dan decided not to, because nobody got hurt. We sat in silence on the drive home. Alter scenarios playing in my head like a movie. What if, I thought to myself. I'm not sure that I could forget how clear that bullet sounded like when it was near me. It'll haunt me at night, and it has been. Dan told my parents about this, and they were just glad that we're okay. Everything went back to normal on Sunday, like there was nothing going on. But what if one of us hadn't made it to Dan's truck? Would everything be the same? This happens back in 2004 in northern Wisconsin. I was 16 at the time and out deer hunting with my dad and a friend of his, Frank. I remember this day like it was yesterday. The dialogue isn't word for word, but the idea of it is 100% accurate. My dad and I had a few different stands over an area of maybe 3/4 of a square mile. He had been hunting there for at least 10 years, and I'd been going with him since I was 5. Up until I was 12, the legal age to hunt with a rifle, I had just been tagging along. This particular morning, we walked to my stand first. It was about 5 a.m., so still dark outside. I got situated, and my dad and Frank went off to our other 2 stands over a ridge, maybe another 500 to 600 yards off. Sitting there in the dark is always a little eerie. Not long after my dad and Frank left, I see a flashlight from the general direction of where they headed, maybe 200 yards away, roughly moving in my direction. I figured that they forgot something from the truck or something, so I radioed to see what they were doing. "We're sitting in the stand. Frank is about to head to the other one," he says. Obviously, this flashlight is someone else. This isn't super uncommon, and it really isn't a big deal. Those woods get crowded sometimes, and there is a spot to park in that general direction. I turn on my lights so the other hunter can see that there is someone there. He stops. I see the light turn and go a different direction. No big deal. I end up dozing off while it's still dark out. When I wake up, the sun is up. It's around 8 a.m. I sit there for a bit, radio my dad to see if he has heard or seen anything moving. Nothing yet. A couple gunshots off in the distance is all. I get up and I go for a slow little walk to get my blood moving again. So far, maybe 30 yards out and back, trying not to make a sound. I come back to my stand, sit down and take a real good look around. Nothing really going on. I finally look out to my left, where I had seen the flashlight before, and I see orange. For anyone unfamiliar, hunters have to wear blaze orange during gun season. I radioed my dad and Frank to see if either one of them were moving around. Dad says no. I hear nothing from Frank. I grab the binoculars out of my backpack to see if it's Frank. It's definitely not. This guy is looking at me through his scope, rifle aimed directly at me. This is a huge no-no. Massive rule that we all learn in hunter's education. Never point your rifle at something you don't intend to shoot. Dumb people still do it though. It's few and far between, but it happens. This is why normal people use binoculars. My first thought is, what a freaking douche. The thing is, even with me looking at him, he doesn't put his gun down. Now I'm starting to panic, thinking that I'm going to be the next hunting murder victim. I slowly grab my rifle, get up, staying behind as many trees as I can, and I walk down a little path to the side of my stand. My stand was on this kind of little knoll on the side of a much larger hill. I radio my dad and I tell him what's up. He tells me to sit tight and stay out of sight. Obviously, as a 16-year-old, I couldn't do that and I had to keep looking. Every time I looked, the guy was still aiming in my direction, but was always standing in a different spot. Like I would look, go back to hiding, look again, and he would be 30 yards from where he was the last time. About 10 minutes of this goes by when my dad radios me. "How you doing, bud?" Looking back, he was very obviously trying to keep me calm. At the time, I thought he just wasn't taking me seriously. He's still there, but he keeps moving. I don't know what his problem is. Dad told me to just keep hidden and he'll figure it out. That he'll be coming up near him in a minute or two. And that's when I hear the shot. I lost my crap trying to get a hold of my dad. Did he just get shot? Where the heck is he? Did he have to shoot the guy? What's going on? I sit there for maybe 2 to 3 minutes that felt like hours. Alright, come on out and head towards my stand. I peek over the little knoll I was behind and see my dad waving from along the ridge that the random guy had been on. I make the trek over to him to see what happened. It turns out Frank was feeling a little restless and took a little stroll and ended up on the other side of that particular ridge that the stranger was on, not knowing that he was there. He had knocked his radio battery loose while he was getting situated earlier in the morning, and had no idea anything was even going on. The shot that I heard was actually Frank shooting a deer. Dad said as soon as Frank shot, the guy walked off away from us towards the logging road. We helped Frank out with his deer and decided to call it an early day. Although I was extremely nervous, the rest of the week went on without any incidents. I love waking up in the dark and walking the sunrise with my dogs. I didn't intend to own 2 huskies and a German Shepherd mix, but they each found me and I couldn't turn them away. We usually jog about 5 miles daily, often in the neighborhood, but nearly as often I load us up in the van and drive 10 minutes to the wooded Metro Park. I love it there. They offer some trails that allow quads and motorbikes and some bicycles and skis, some just people. And last year they opened a new one that allows pets. It's a 5-mile loop into the area farthest from the city. We live on the northern edge of town, but in the dark with no leaves in the trees, you can clearly see the red glow of the CVS sign for most of the hike. These are tamed woods with asphalt paths and concrete fire pits, and rangers patrolling normally. And the hospital behind CVS means that there's emergency medical care within walking distance. I was up coughing again in the night. I had a serious case of pneumonia 2 months ago and was not fully recovered when this sinus infection hit me. I'm past the fever part, so we're walking, not yet jogging again. But after being up in the night, I didn't get up in time to go walk before I dropped my kids off at school. And then my youngest had an appointment, and then I had to run a few errands. And then we had unexpected visitors right after school. And then they stayed for dinner. And finally, I got the dogs into the van and we made it to the park just before it started to get dark. I was irritated at all the little things that kept me from my walk all day. But as we drove all the way to the back of the park, I realized that we would be walking the sunset, watching it over the lake and the hills and through the bare trees. And the park was clearing out now. As it started towards dark, we would very nearly have the place to ourselves, and might not have to pull off the path to let others pass us. An amazing number of people who are afraid of dogs hike the pet path. All those little irritations that led up to the singular moment of beauty I would not otherwise have seen and appreciated. This was going to be a really good walk. It's funny how life works out when you let it. I parked in my spot at the farthest end of the parking lot by the bathrooms. A mile-long, people, walkers or joggers only path looped through the woods, and by the lake came out by the bathrooms. I like to run it when I came here alone. It was a glorious walk through a Bob Ross painting. My mind cleared and my thoughts quieted, and I simply experienced the woods, my feet on the path, my dogs panting, the nature sounds, the beauty of the sky. I absolutely loved it. About halfway now and the city sounds had faded away until I could only hear the birds and frogs, and insects all singing their songs of territory, and mating, and life. And then a crack. Utter silence and absolute stillness. My dogs and I turned instantly towards the source of the sound and froze. Behind us and to the right, the sound had come from the crest of a hill. I could see nothing and heard only the dogs panting. I waited for the nature sounds to return. They did not. All 3 of the dogs slowly raised their ruffs, first standing on end, all of their shoulders and necks, tails held tall and proud, making themselves look larger and more threatening. I took a step towards them, and the female husky, the leader of my little pack, instantly put her ears back and her head down and pulled me down the path. All three of them left their tails and ruffs up, but the two males also put their ears back and heads down and began to pull me, so off we went. The woods were still silent. We must have startled a buck on the slope of the hill, not seen him, and after we had passed, he leapt up the hill and jumped a dead tree, and his hoof hit a dead branch and the branch broke, and heard that cracking sound and scared everyone. But why were the woods still silent? Maybe there was something up there. Homeless people must stay here sometimes. The bathrooms have heat so the pipes don't freeze. But this is about as far out as the path goes. It would be a good place to sleep. Maybe he's setting up a shelter and broke a branch. But why were the woods still silent? We were about as far from the city as we could get in these woods, and you couldn't see the CVS sign, or the glow from streetlights, or even hear the traffic noises. It was dark and still, and absolutely quiet except for the panting dogs and 4 sets of footsteps on the path. I wanted to run. The dogs wanted to run. Bigfoot. There was a Bigfoot breaking a log to say, "Get out." There are no Bigfoot in city limits, I promise you that. Brain, come on, it was a deer. The woods are still quiet because of us. I have 200 pounds of dog here. Yes, they're the big huskies. And another 200 pounds of me. Yeah, I'm a little fat, but I've got good muscle underneath. I have broad shoulders that don't fit into women's shirts and big hands that don't fit into women's gloves. I can lift 100 pounds over my head. We are the scariest thing in these woods. There's no bear, there's no wolves, there's no Bigfoot. There are deer and there are foxes and there might be an angry raccoon, but we are the biggest, baddest, scariest thing in these woods. Unless there's someone with a gun. Shut up, you're not helping. The dogs had not stopped once to sniff or mark. Heads down, ears back, tails and ruffs still held high. They just wanted to go. We had gone almost a mile now, me craning my head the whole time, trying to see as far as I could in all directions while letting the dogs pull me down the path. And it was still absolutely silent. Not an overflying goose, not a cricket. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Except us. Here came the third and longest of the 3 steep hills on this trail. I had been running these to rebuild my strength and endurance, but if I ran this, I would be blown at the top. The top where it curved around as it crested and you couldn't see anything past the thick trees. The top where, if you were deeper in the woods, you could follow a more gradual ridge up to the crest of the hill and wait, unseen, for someone to come up the path. Ambush. It was a deer. Turn around. It was just a deer. What if it's behind us? Ambush, deer, gun, Bigfoot. This is why I run. The noise in my head is unbearable otherwise. Up the hill, walk, pay attention, watch the dogs. The dogs were still on high alert, but they didn't hesitate to go up the hill. In fact, they wanted to go faster. Just don't walk, don't get smoked. Be able to run or fight if you have to. Yeah, okay, I'm scared too. The woods should not still be silent. The dogs should not still be on alert. It's not a cat or a bear or a wolf, and I really doubt it's Bigfoot. But it could be a person, so let's be smart. Just walk, we are not good prey. The dogs will protect me. The huskies might not alone, but the shepherd will, and they'll follow his lead. Be smart and get out. Only another mile now to the lake and the first parking lot, and then another half-mile along the way to the second lot where my van was. Hearing traffic noises now, but still no birds, no crickets, no frogs. The smell almost stopped me in my tracks, but the dogs kept pulling. Sour and grassy and oddly metallic, and crap. Crap and blood and partially digested grass. I smelled the contents of a deer's stomach. Someone hunted these woods, and the dogs were not at all interested in the smell. We ran. I don't remember much of that last mile, we just ran. Desna, the big female husky, finally stopped to drink some lake water as we came out by the parking lot, and then she began to sniff and pee. The boys followed her lead. There is a single truck parked. I relaxed quite a bit, but still I felt on edge. Down the lake at the next parking lot, I could see headlights. They must be parked at the turnaround at the end of the lot closest to the lake. Their headlights illuminated the lakeside path. They're watching us. I'm halfway to the van now, and the car drove away. 20 feet from the van, and I heard a motor coming down the nearest path. I decided to put the dogs in the car on the driver's side instead of the passenger side like normal. The sound of the motor came closer. The leashes caught on the armrest, and I had to untangle them before the dogs could jump into the van. The motor came closer down the path. I had to be gone before it came out. I knew it with an absolute certainty. Finally, the dogs were in. I slammed the door and I jumped in the front, fumbling for the lock button, shaking hands and clipping the keys from my jogging belt, starting the car and gunning it into reverse. And as my headlights swept over the entrance of the path by the bathrooms, they lit up a four-wheeler coming out of the woods. I was dropping the transmission into drive and hitting the gas, and as my brain processed what my eyes saw, it informed me that there was something across the handlebars. A gun, a deer carcass. I couldn't tell, and because of the angle when pulling away, I couldn't see him in the rearview mirror at all.